Hey guys, welcome to Finally Clicked, the podcast where we discuss business, leadership, and personal development. My name is Margaret Smith, and I'm the Director of Operations for Pickett Street Properties, a real estate team out of Bothell, Washington. And I'll be here every week with our owner and team leader, Jesse D. Moore. We'll be digging into concepts and ideas that have helped us both personally and professionally, and you'll also get a chance to hear from local and national experts that we know provide massive value to get to the point where it all finally clicks. Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of Finally Clicked. It's December, and this is Margaret Smith, and I'm here with Jesse Moore.
I thought you were going to give us the weather report there for a second.
I could, because there is snow coming up in the forecast.
No, what are you talking? There's no snow out there.
There is, actually. I'm headed to Leavenworth this weekend, and thankfully I'm not driving my Honda Fit, because I would probably not make it.
Yeah, Clay Elum has a bunch of snow.
Does it?
I have a friend who, his Snapchat, it's like 10 inches of snow. Oh. His husky's like going nuts, running around in the snow. Beautiful. Margaret, we have a guest today.
We do.
Yeah. And this is somebody I've actually been wanting to talk to for a while. For context, I'm the king of context. And a few years ago, I came across this community page called Live in Everett. And like anything I get interested in, I kind of deep dive on it and try to figure out how it came into being and who's doing it and why are they doing it. And I've mentioned them to you many times as we've talked about ideas and things we wanted to try. And so I'm excited today to have Garret Hunt here today to talk about his program, Live in Everett. So welcome, Garret.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And like I mentioned before, I've hosted a lot of podcasts, but I think this is my first time being a guest. So it's a little weird being on the other side of the coin here, but excited to be here. So yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
And I think we should start with your origin story a little bit, right? Any great superhero, you start with their origin story first. So I'm kind of interested. Can you just start with how Live in Everett came into being and why it came into being?
Absolutely. So let's see. I'll try not to start too far back and bore you guys to death, but I grew up in the north end of Snohomish County in Seven Lakes area by Smoky Point there, kind of more of a rural area, no sidewalk. So Everett was like the big city to me when I was a kid growing up. And there was always things I liked about it. And so in 2009, I chose to move to Everett intentionally. I was 23 years old at the time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but for some reason, I just had this strong feeling like I wanted to be in Everett, and that was where I kind of wanted to put down roots as I was kind of trying to figure the direction of my life out. And 2012 ended up getting into real estate. I was actually at Keller Williams years ago for a short while. I think I sat across from you on a plane once, actually, coming back from a conference in Texas. And I can't remember if I actually met you or not, but I knew of you a little bit. And so I was a full-time real estate agent from about 2012, 2013 up until around 2017 or so. And during that time, my good friend, Tyler Chism, he had also, well, I shouldn't say also, but he had been working, doing some work in the city of Everett for local tourism. And the interesting thing he learned about the tourism world is that everything that they were creating had to be focused on people outside of Everett, because the way that the tourism program is funded, it's meant to attract visitors, to bring them into Everett, right? But there wasn't really anyone focused on creating value and content for locals. And so he said, hey, wouldn't this be perfect for us to do? He said, what if I got into real estate with you? And we started essentially a community blog, and that was how the idea came about. And so in 2015, I hired him as my assistant, basically, and kind of trained him in real estate. And we started Live in Everett together. And at the beginning, it was really meant as a business development tool for our real estate business, but we had so much fun doing it and kind of just started to gain natural traction within the first couple of years. Once about 2018 hit, I really started to shift my focus away from real estate and focusing more on turning Live in Everett into its own media company and trying to get it to stand on its own feet. And so, yeah, that's how it all kind of came about.
So, the idea of a community page is not a new one. I remember back in like 2010, Dale Chumley, who's an agent out of Vancouver, Washington, he had a website and a community page called like 100 Things to Do in Vancouver. And so it was similar. And so to provide more context to our listeners, what we're talking about and the reason we're having you here is the idea of getting hyper-local. It's interesting to me, if we go back a few years, back to when you may have seen me traveling to Austin more often, I think the conversation that was being had a lot was about expansion. And the idea of, okay, you're rock solid in your market, now expand into the market 35 minutes away from you, and then build a network that way. And it was sexy and fun to talk about, but it was harder to implement than maybe people realized. We tried for years to do it unsuccessfully, not finding the right people. And then when I took a step back and looked at it, expansion, the thing that I always got stuck on was we have such a fractured market here. I added up the top 50 producers and all their production in like a given year in the Puget Sound area. And the top 50 producers, if you compiled all their production together, it was like 3% market share.
Wow.
And so I was like, it seems weird for me to try to go out and expand into other markets when we have a giant market here and it's so fractured and no one owns the market here, right? And so then I started shifting my ideas away from expansion and towards being hyper-local.
Nice.
And so instead of being like, I'm going to have a team in,
Yes.
New York or
I mean,
Savannah.
we were interviewing people in San Francisco, downtown Seattle, Puyallup, Tacoma area. But like you said, it was just nothing ever really clicked. And so the idea of staying hyperlocal and really digging into our community here, because Jesse's actually originally from Montana. So he built the business here just when he moved here from the ground up, just became more and more, I could see like it made more sense for us. But you're right. That was the topic of the day. And man, I went to every expansion class with you, learned everything. What it did was it did help us.
We spent over
Thousands of
$10,000
yeah.
on learning the expansion systems and knowing.
But you know what? I feel like what it did for us is, at least for me on the operations side, like we have a solid foundation. I'm ready to expand at any moment if we're ready to. But even it helped even just for our local team. I feel like we have a much better foundation then.
Well, and being a Montana kid, having a sense of community is a big thing in Montana. In fact, everyone, it's a double-sided coin. We can be a little ornery to outsiders, and
just a little.
And so, but we do depend on our neighbors to even get harvests done and to get brandings done, and there's a dependence upon one another that's a little bit. It's synergistic in that area, and you don't see that in the same way out here in an urban metropolis. Like, I'm sorry, but Seattle's a big, like, it's funny to me that you're talking about your rural experience and Everett's the big city, right?
Yeah.
But I get it. I get it because my big city was 8,400 people.
Oh, wow.
Like, so as what I get really focused on with your story is this idea of being hyper-local. The idea, instead of sending out sentries and building up a network that way, is instead like doubling down on where you're at.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in proximity, and I feel like the closer you're doing something to home, the more quality that you can bring to that thing. And it's funny because I really love business and investing and entrepreneurship, but I love it all with the caveat that it's done in like a conscious, mindful way. And like I used to own my first house I bought actually was a duplex, which I think you mentioned you bought a duplex before as well. And I love the idea of owning real estate or owning investments. But when you start, you hear about a lot of people investing out of state and stuff. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But for me, I really love stuff that having it be as close to my home and my community as possible to where I can just manage it and grow the relationship with it, I feel like in a much more quality way. And I mean, even coming down here to Bothell today, I mean, it kind of feels like a road trip to me because almost my entire life is in Everett, right around my little community. And I feel like it makes for a more quality of life in both life and business, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going back to the beginning, so Tyler says this to you, and you guys have this idea of doing Live in Everett. When you have that spark of an idea, what does that look like? Is it just the community page? Is it a Facebook page? Is it the videos? Like, how does this come into being?
Well, and I should add, too, actually, that before I moved to Everett in 2009, so I grew up skateboarding and filming skateboarding. I went to school for filmmaking, and that was kind of my first big passion. I moved down to Southern California for a few years to work in the skateboard industry and to kind of pursue that dream. So I had a creative background, and then Tyler
I was
also
wondering because the stuff that you guys do, I know a little bit about is ridiculous. It's cool. Like, I highly approve, and I don't love that many videos or things that I knew because I knew you guys were into real estate before this, and so I don't like most real estate agents' marketing or videos, and you guys have solid content, so that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we both had those backgrounds, and so initially I think the vision was really based around the website and it being essentially thinking of it as a community blog. And our thought was, like I said, initially it was tied into our real estate business, and so the thought was, rather than, you know how much money you can spend on marketing your real estate business, right? Like just using like mailers, for example. It's not cheap if you want to send out, tons of letters to a big farm area or something like that. You can drop some serious money in. And so we thought, rather than doing that kind of those traditional real estate agent marketing tactics, let's think of a way that something that felt genuine for us and that we felt like could add real value to the community and be something useful, rather than just some fluff that's going to end up in the garbage can. And so that was the initial vision, was really built around the website and just kind of this hyper-local, hyper-positive community blog. And yeah, that was kind of the vision from the start. And
what is that? So it's a standalone website?
Yeah.
And not a Facebook page, but a standalone website.
Well, we did start social media that came along with that as well. But that was really the heart of it, was the website itself.
Okay. And did you use that? Did you develop just a standalone website, or did you use like a blogging platform?
So we used Squarespace.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then we did. Tyler's decent with a little bit of coding and stuff, and anything that we need to customize a little bit. But for the most part, we just kind of adapted a template. So it's nothing fancy per se, just kind of a plug and play that we just put together and made it work for how we needed it to.
And if you're listening to this and want to know more about what we're talking about, you can go to Facebook and type in Live in Everett, and you'll find their community page there, and you'll see a post including their videos. Is the website liveineverett.com?
It is. You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
And then
same with our Instagram as well, as Live in Everett.
And so I think you caught my attention primarily through the videos, right? Like what you don't know about me is I'm a foodie. I'm a little bit of a maven. I like to have people come to me and ask me for recommendations. I like knowing my community and kind of curating that experience for them based on my love of the community and also kind of cueing into what they like. And so when I really consumed that information as a consumer. And I nerded out as a real estate agent and as a marketing guy, but I was consuming your content because I wanted to know about the best places to eat in Everett. And so, and then when I realized that you guys were agents, then I just was, I was sick. I was sick because you guys did it before I did it. So it's just the two of you, and you start out right away saying, hey, we're going to do these like 3 to 10 minute videos, basically adding exposure to our community, to these, our local businesses. And then you're just basically building a database of content that's everything about Everett, right?
Everything positive about Everett. Yeah, just focused on all the good things, quality of life type stuff, like fun things to do, places to check out. And, food is probably one of the number one things, because we did a survey and we found out that every single one of our audience members eats, it turns out. And it's a great way. It just goes straight to people's hearts. It's such a highly relatable subject. I'm slightly ashamed to admit I'm not a huge foodie, actually. I love food as much as anyone, but I don't get into it as much as some people per se. But it's just such a relatable thing that I think we found that's always probably one of the most common topics that does the best. And who doesn't love finding a great place to go, check out and have a good meal. And the videos did come a little bit later. We weren't doing those right at the beginning, but I think the videos have helped us get a lot of recognition and visibility, because video these days I think is probably the number one medium that really the algorithms on social and stuff really push those out, and it's a little easier for people to watch and consume.
When you started, I want to say you guys were with Windermere at the time.
Lamoureux Real Estate.
Before Lamoureux, you were at KW?
Yeah. So I was at Keller Williams for a short while.
Everett office?
Yeah. So when I first started out, I actually grew up with Jennifer Beatles, who's a great agent. So when I was first interested in getting into real estate, she was one of, I think, the only people I knew that was in real estate. So I reached out to her. She ended up hiring me as her assistant for a short while.
Too funny.
And so I got licensed. I stayed at Keller Williams for a little while. I got recruited to a big team up north that I was on for a very brief period. And, as a new agent, it was really I'm the type of person I usually like to commit to things for a long term. But as a new agent, I found myself kind of floundering a little bit to find the right fit that kind of felt like home, if that makes sense. And so ultimately, I ended up at Lamoureux.
Was that a team in Marysville?
It's out of Everett. Okay. They have they're like a small one-off boutique brokerage that has deep roots in Everett, and they're really a part of the community, which is why what they do really resonated with me, and it felt like a good fit. It ended up being a good fit. I was there for I think 5-6 years, and so when we ended up starting Live in Everett, that's where we started at. They let us have a little office in there that we used, and so Tyler and I worked out of there. And then right after we started Live in Everett, we actually had some maybe 6 months later, we had started having some businesses reach out to us and stuff, saying, "Hey, I love what you guys are doing. Would love to be a part of it." And we ended up getting a little bit of sponsorship money, and we just immediately reinvested all of that and hired just a super part-time employee. And so we had the three of us in our little office up there, and just got things going.
And so you do the videos. You guys, I imagine you start with your favorite places, right? Or what's a good method for starting something like this?
So we always try and be, it's kind of a bit of a hybrid where we want it to be something that we enjoy, that is a favorite place, that is genuine from us. But even more so, we want to make sure that our audience is going to enjoy it. So kind of our mantra has always been add value, create delight. And we try and keep that in mind when we're deciding what type of place we're going to go check out, is what's our audience going to enjoy hearing about. And some people do give us flack for being so positive, but we do try and vet places before we go. It's we're not going to spend a bunch of time going to check out some place if
it's
got a
lousy.
1-star review, and it's no one needs to hear about that.
So you don't post negative reviews?
We try and strike the balance with being honest and transparent, but when we have critical feedback, to say it in a thoughtful way. Sometimes that can be tricky. We have experimented a little bit with being a little more critical, but really that's our brand. Our tagline is "Good things happen here." We try and keep it really positive, and Everett is a city that does get a lot of negative press, and a lot of people have negative perceptions of it. And so we really try and balance that out with reminding people that, hey, this is a decent-sized city with over 100,000 plus people, and there's a lot of different businesses and things going on here. And so let's make sure to also acknowledge that there's some really positive stuff happening.
Yeah, I think if I were to take a stab at this, I would say geographically, any town on the edge of a huge urban community, a lot of people get pushed to the edges, right? Because of the economy of an urban area. And so when I think about Seattle, it's continuous city all the way to North Everett. And then if you go south, it's continuous city to Tacoma, basically, right? And I feel like Everett and Tacoma do get a bad rap because of that, because they are the edge of this big metropolis. And then beyond that, you have country, more rural living, more rural stories. And I just think Everett gets a bad rap sometimes because it's on the edge.
No, I think that makes total sense. As a native Seattleite, I mean, I grew up near the heart of everything in Seattle. And so I was not looking forward to where I had to purchase when we first talked about when I was going to buy a house. And so it's, I think I like what you're doing because that's very much how I operate in my personal life as far as the positivity, and because there's so much negativity out there, and you will get a bad rap, or I bet you get some interesting comments from people because they think it's unrealistic, or just, I guess, I don't know. I guess idealistic is the best word for it. So, but I have to say, like, I heard about Live in Everett from Jesse first, and then within the next couple weeks, my brother actually mentioned it to me because he lives just a couple blocks away from me. So they moved into Everett after I did, and he was like, "Have you heard about these guys live in Everett? They talk about all these places to eat," because he wanted places to take his wife out on dates. And so I just saw real quickly how the community was going to connect with what you guys were doing, because there hasn't been anybody out there doing the good work for Everett, like saying, come live here. There's actually good things happening. There's places popping up in downtown Everett that are super creative. And so it's been interesting to watch it grow from the perspective of a community member.
Yeah, people have really enjoyed it and seem to embrace it in the community. And that's probably what I'm most proud of. I would say from the outside looking in, you know, that we have grown the audience consistently in the 4+ years that we've been doing it. And so externally, I feel like that's affirming that we're doing something right. Internally, has been more of a struggle with kind of figuring out the business model behind it as we've tried to evolve it into being its own company. It's been a challenge. But yeah, it's been really, really encouraging how much the community has come around it and embraced it. And the Live in Everett, we won a Mayor's Arts Award last year, which was really cool. And yeah, we've gotten a couple awards now, and yeah, it's just always so encouraging to hear that feedback. So thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
So how did it impact your real estate business? Because obviously that's the sexy part I think most people want to know about, is like, if you create, obviously this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
You're doing, you did one video a week pretty normally?
Yeah.
And
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Between editing
Yeah.
and all that. I've done that, and it's not. That's why when we've talked about doing stuff like this, it's like I would have to have another person, or it would become part of like probably half my job. If I were doing what you guys were doing between the website and social media, it's a ton.
Right, and you're doing a 5 to 10 minute video on average.
Yeah, 3 to 5 minutes.
But your production on that is extensive. It's not like it's a single shot video. Right. Like there's a lot of editing involved.
Music in the background. And
But so how did that translate into the real estate business? Did you sell houses for any of the business owners? Did you get people that came through the Live in Everett funnel that ended up buying and selling homes with you?
Yeah, it definitely helped attract more clients, or even I think just validate what we were doing. I think there were certain people that maybe we knew a little bit, but they became so much more familiar with us through the work we were doing. And again, you know, everything that we publish, it's in a way that we're trying to add value and delight to the community. And so people are just naturally watching it already. And then so, you know, that's a big thing in real estate, is you want to be top of mind, right? And so what better way than if people are seeing you every single week and consuming your stuff out of pure interest for themselves, but then it endears them to you and what you're doing. And So I think there's a lot of value and potential there for agents and other business professionals. I will say, purely speaking, from like a business development standpoint, we probably went too heavy on the content. And I think that is from both our creative backgrounds. And then also we weren't 100% focused on growing the real estate business because Tyler and his wife, Lori Chism, they also still have a creative firm called Milltown Creative Co. doing like branding and design type stuff. And as Tyler and I started working together more right after we started to live in Everett, it became apparent that his and Laura's creative business was also growing and getting busier. And so what we ended up doing was we decided just to combine everything into one company and just be 50-50 business partners. And we thought and we're hoping, and I think we were trying to maybe fit a puzzle together that wasn't quite meant to go together perfectly, that those businesses would kind of add synergy together to each other. But I think it kind of split our focus and probably distracted us. And that's why in about 2018, I started focusing away from real estate, because I felt like I was trying to do too many things and I wasn't necessarily doing any one thing well. And so I think that's probably a big lesson I learned if someone is thinking about developing a type of content marketing strategy similar to this, is to just be careful to keep it in balance and keep it something that you can do consistently. Because if you're doing a weekly video and social media and articles and newsletter, all this crazy stuff that we're doing, I mean, it's a lot of work.
So let's just imagine that I'm a genie and you can ask me for the amount of money it would take to run Live It in Everett the way that you wanted to.
Oh.
How much would your monthly budget be?
Wow.
The way that you wanted to.
And here's the thing. I'm not talking pie in the sky. I'm talking real numbers where, like, if you guys, you've had to make some tough decisions recently. And so I'm saying how much you would need to, like, keep it up and keep it running.
So to do it at our fullest capacity that we have operated at, where we're also doing the weekly video and weekly podcasts and all that, I mean, I would say ideally, probably in the neighborhood of like $15,000 a month, somewhere around there, 15 to 20 maybe.
Okay. Because I know marketing budgets for large real estate teams is often in the tens of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. So, if you wanted to, for people that are out there listening and they're wondering, what the scale is of something like this, you'd probably need to dedicate $10,000 minimum to this a month. Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is the people. We've had really awesome team members that have contributed over the years, and people who have different areas of expertise. I've never recorded a podcast before, but our friend Henry J. that helped us do our podcast for years, audio is his expertise, and so he was great at helping us do that. And so I think too, part of it is just finding the right team members who can bring, their skills and talents to the table. Because even if you say you have, a couple full-timers working on it, they're not necessarily going to be able to do all the different things. But maybe if you have people part-time who have different areas of expertise that you can bring in, I would say that's more so how we've done it. Or, a lot of our writers and stuff we work with are just subcontractors. But it's just finding the right people that are kind of the right fit.
I would imagine you would need a minimum, even startup, of $5,000 a month just to get like kind of a bare bones operation going, as far as having an editor and the equipment and.
Yeah, and it just depends on how much you want to hire out, how much you want to do yourself, and how much you want to hustle. I mean, we definitely did it more of just kind of the bootstrap approach, where we're just doing everything ourselves. But if you have a real estate company or business that you're running and you need to hire it out so you can stay focused on your business, because you want this to add to your business and not be a big distraction for you, then you could definitely get something going for $5,000 a month. I mean, it's fun work, right? So you don't have to pay somebody a fortune to go out and create cool content about what's awesome in the community. You know, it's a very, very fun type of focus to have in your daily work. So yeah, I think you could definitely get started for $5,000 a month for sure.
And any stories of people reaching out to you that like moved to Everett because of your community page?
So many, it's crazy. Like people, like that's one thing that's crazy about the videos is people will just stop us, you know, at the grocery store, on the street, and I can't even tell you how many people have legitimately told me like they moved to Everett largely because of Live in Everett. And it's just like, wow, like that's amazing. And also just how so many people have told us how we have not only convinced people to move to Everett, but just kind of influenced the culture of Everett in general, which is just kind of crazy to think about. And that's kind of one of my mantras actually, is to not overthink it, you know, because it can get, sometimes I feel intimidated by our audience. You know, I've like worked so hard to build it, and then I go to like post something and I get like paranoid and anxious, and I'm like, oh, did I, you know, is there spelling error in here or something? And I'm like,
the bigger the audience you get, I'm sure the more comments and feedback you get.
Yeah, totally, exactly. But you don't overthink it.
You can't.
Just start with the same heart you started with and have fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if I ever want a business that has its own subreddit. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh my
if you're so big that people are like have a community just to talk about you, I'm not.
Hey, I think that means you're doing something right. Yes.
I just have to ignore it completely. Yeah.
Too funny.
So what's going on with Live in Everett now, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, so we've been going through a lot of transition recently, actually, and like I said before, I think we probably went a little bit too heavy on the content, and so we've actually just recently we're taking a break right now from our weekly video and podcasts and having to scale back a little bit. And part of that is we've been trying to figure out our business model. You know, we work with a lot of small businesses. You know, like we were talking about, we do a lot of content on restaurants and stuff, but a lot of small businesses don't have much money to advertise. And before we were doing, I would say, a little bit more of a traditional advertising offerings. You know, if you want to buy an ad on the side of the blog and you can pay, you know, X dollars per month or whatever. Whereas now we're actually right now transitioning into more of a membership model and really structuring it for small businesses where it can start at a low monthly affordable rate and they just pay the same amount every month, and it's just ongoing in perpetuity, and they get certain benefits that come along with that membership. And so there's kind of two goals that we really want to accomplish there. You know, one being a good resource for local small businesses and to elevate them and those businesses that are doing good things. And then that also creates consistent recurring revenue for us as well that we can build a foundation off of. And so that's kind of the hope and where, at least internally, we're kind of adjusting our focus right now.
Yeah, it's I think about eater.com and how I don't know are you familiar with them at all? So Eater is a foodie website, and it reminds me of your site in that it is every subdomain is a city. So like Seattle.eater.com is the Seattle version of Eater. And then if you go to Portland, I know I can go to Portland.eater.com and get and it's just all the reviews of the best restaurants. Not just the best, but also best in category, and then also what's new. And so a lot of industry news for the food industry in a town. And they also have hot maps. So they'll have nice. They'll do hot maps over like East Side restaurants or the best patio dining in the summer in Seattle. Best happy hour, best place to get chicken and waffles in Seattle, in those type of hot maps and stuff like that. And so when I think about being hyperlocal, there's definitely a breaking point that you have to get to, right? I would think, as far as you either have to be, and this is the conversation that I think everyone's having, that we're having when it comes to expansion versus being hyperlocal. Eater does it on a level that it's a national website, right? And then it's broken into individual markets, and those individual markets are then it's a curated website experience for them, right? But it's templated by everyone looks the same because it's templated by the national model. Then you have live in Everett, which you can't really grow beyond the city of Everett, right? But nor do you want to necessarily. If you're for what you're trying to achieve, which is to really focus on this community, one and done, right? You're going to talk about everything related to Everett. Then, did you guys talk about other communities if it got bigger? Like, do you then go to live in Bothell or live in Marysville?
Yeah, kind of the dream, at least for me, has been if we can really get our model dialed in for what we're doing in Everett. And definitely the goal is for Live in Everett to serve the Everett community. But if we can get that model really strong, then my hope has always been to replicate it and to either go to, I think the next step will be either probably going countywide. And my thought is if we were to do, say Live in Snowco or whatever we might call it, and if we start creating content for the county, which I don't know if it would resonate as deeply with people because it's not quite as connected to home. If you live in the south end of the county, you're not going to be as interested on what's going on in the north end of the county. But I think that content could start to be redistributed, and as you create a whole bunch of content about, Bothell or Marysville, then now you can naturally and more easily create your Bothell website or your Marysville website. But for now, it's trying not to get ahead of ourselves and, figuring out first things first.
What are some of the unintended benefits of creating Live in Everett for you? Like for me, I like being in relationship with artists, they could be chefs, they could be musicians, authors. Like we have a relationship with authors through this podcast that's been fun to curate and to feed. So what kind of unintended relationships have formed based on your community pages?
Yeah, I've definitely formed a lot of relationships from it, and I'm kind of a reserved, introverted type person, so it's really good for me in that regard that it's hard for me to form a relationship with someone if I'm like, oh, I don't know what to talk to them about or how to relate to them. But that's what's cool is with Live in Everett, I have the perfect excuse to talk to anybody or, go connect with any business or anything like that. So that's, I think, definitely been a huge benefit. We definitely don't always get free food. We usually don't get free food, but we do get hooked up fairly consistently, where people comp us or they invite us to different things and we get, treated extremely nicely. I feel like there's probably been a lot of things over the years. But I would say just the overall connectedness to the community, and I think it's really enriching on a personal level. And even it's interesting some of the different just random opportunities that are always popping up. Like just the other day, I had a large business contact me that they're looking for a community member to help them recruit employees, someone who can help familiarize them with the community and kind of essentially be like a community consultant. And they're like, hey, do you want to be our person to do this? And I'm like, oh, like that's interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing. And there's been all kinds of cool opportunities that have popped up.
You have some good questions.
Oh, I do.
You do.
Well, I've been following them, and there's another Kenny Klaus out of Arizona. He had a farm network, so he farmed, let's say, an 8,000 member community, and he just got this same kind of seed to be like hyper local. And he's like, how could I service that community in a bigger way, like other than just sending them mail? So he started a restaurant inside of that community, and it's a sports bar. It's called The Hub, and everything is synergistic. Like the mailers that he farms out now all have advertisements for his restaurant, right?
Nice.
With specials. So then that feeds people into the restaurant. In the restaurant, there's advertisements for his real estate business. And so it's all this, like, just this wheel of business, these network businesses that he created that all feed into each other.
That's awesome.
And I just love that idea. It's an idea we've talked about as well. Like, it's interesting being inside of a model like Keller Williams because I think I got a little infatuated. I think everyone gets a little infatuated with the numbers and being in Gary Keller's mastermind group or being on stage, and being featured on a panel or something like that, to where you think in a much bigger way, which I think is great. I think, though, as I started to chase that a little bit, the more I chased it, the more I was like, it wasn't resonating with me in the same way. Like, the idea of flying to all these places every month or once a week or whatever that's not really who I am. And so the more I've thought more and more about just being hyper local in our market, to the point where I think the real challenge to real estate companies like Keller Williams and Windermere and all those out there is that I think we are going to shift away. We're going to shift back towards being hyper local, to where I think the boutique brokerages inside of communities might have a stronger hold than national franchises. It's funny because we went away from that. We had that for a period of time, and then with the advent of the internet, I feel like they went away, but now they're coming back. Just like travel agents, internet killed them, and now they're coming back too.
Well, I think he mentioned it earlier about how one of his number one, we all look for the people, the who, right? So find the people with the specific talents who can do a podcast, who can do video, who can do graphic design, who can maintain that content. It's kind of the same thing as I don't think we've seen. There's very few expansion teams that are doing very, very well because they haven't found the right who to run that and duplicate. Like, they can't make 3 of me, right? You have to find someone else who would operate similar to Margaret in another city. It just, you can't.
Well, and the culture of every town is different too.
Yeah, it's so different.
The culture in Everett, Washington is very different than the culture of Seattle, Washington.
For sure, yeah.
And the culture of Seattle is very different from the culture in Tucson. So I think it can be, like, we talk about culture a lot on our team, and we're in charge of that. It's our responsibility to create the culture and to manage it and make sure that it is what we want it to be. And I don't know that you can take someone out of Montana and throw them in New York and expect them to do well. Anyway, these are the thoughts I have in my head. And so I've been obsessed with this hyper local idea, and I'm remorseful that it took me this long to, like, reach out to you and interview you and talk to you, because Margaret will tell you, I talk about your guys' site probably once a quarter, as far as talking about. And when people ask me, even when younger agents come to me and ask me for advice, I tell them this is what I would do. I go to live in Everett and check out what they do, and I would do that. Like, if you're young and hungry and had nothing to lose, then just double down and put everything into being hyper local.
That's what's great. If you have the time to put into it, starting a blog, starting social pages, and creating content, it's mostly just going to cost you time.
That's the only other question I had for you is, can you give us an idea of the number of hours, maybe at the height of when you were doing everything, and now number of operating hours behind everything compared to what you spent in your real estate business?
I would say at the height, when we had our most robust kind of content distribution we were doing, it was probably the equivalent of only like 3 full-timers. And that's kind of broken up between different people and contractors and stuff. But that's like hustling and grinding pretty hard. Now we've had to scale that back a little bit.
So 3 full-timers, 40 hours a week, like when you talk about full-time?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, maybe 3 to 4, maybe like 120, like 150 hours a week or so is probably what we were putting into.
And then any time outside of that you would spend on your real estate business?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so it was, yeah, it was real busy for a while there. And it's like getting any new business off the ground. You really got to work hard at it. It takes a lot of time, especially with. That's what's been tricky about Live in Everett is sure there's a lot of media companies and blogs and stuff out there, but I would say the way that we've tried to approach it and what we're trying to do, it's not exactly like anything else. It's not like something traditional like a coffee shop where we can just look at what the one in the next town over is doing and study their best practices. It's a lot of like figuring it out as we go.
Well, not only that, I think this model would do better in a town that had more turnover. And so let me explain that. I pulled the numbers a few weeks ago, and the number of units sold in Snohomish County 10 years ago is down 71% today.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wow.
That's a huge drop. So if you think about all the real estate agents in Snohomish County, which is a lot, and then you think about you take away 71% of the inventory, and now all those people are having to exist and survive and run their company on way less business overall. And so with a model like this that's hyper local, but people are only turning over their houses every 7 to 10 years, you haven't even hit a cycle yet. You're 4 years into this, right?
Yep. Yeah.
You haven't hit one cycle yet. There might be people that bought in the last 4 years, and they're gonna sell in 2 to 3 years from now, and they're gonna use you, but you don't know that, and you have to exist until they hit that cycle. And
Right.
So if you were in an area that had a higher turnover, then I could see this model working extremely well. If the turnover was 3 to 5 years, but doing this consistently week in, week out, in a market where people only buy a house every 7 to 10 years, you have to be pretty patient person.
Do you think that would have been the same kind of reasoning behind our program that we mentioned? So the loyalty club.
Oh yeah. So you want me to talk about the loyalty club? Okay. So
because I think it's kind of very similar. Actually, I think we would have had to run it for 4 to 7 years to really see the true ROI.
one thing that you mentioned the membership model, and Gary Keller would kiss you on the mouth right now because he loves membership models. And I was in a room with him, and he was really pushing this. Like, how do we get away from being transaction based, and how do we get towards being membership based? And as I was sitting there, anytime I'm challenged like that, I try to come up with an answer. And so my answer was loyalty club for our clients. So if you bought or sold a home with us, our closing gift to you was you would get a membership into our loyalty club. And it was a 12-month membership. And 2 weeks after you closed with us, you would receive a box with Pickett Street branding. You'd open it up to tissue paper that was branded with Pickett Street, and then there would be a curated item I would pick out, and that we would send to all of our loyalty club members. And so as an example, Yeti tumbler, double wall stainless steel aluminum tumbler. We sent that out to everybody. People loved it. It's like Christmas. They get the package in the mail, and they don't know what's inside, and they would wait for their family members to come home, and they'd open it. And then we get feedback from them how great it was. Well, it cost a fortune.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I want to say in the I know for a fact the first year cost us, I think, $36,000 to $40,000, I think. Am I wrong?
I'd have to look back
I'm pretty
at the
sure.
numbers and see.
I'm pretty sure.
Regardless, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yes. Not to mention the packing and the hours of
Yeah.
operations behind it.
And
Yeah, we became our own little factory.
I mean, we were sending out, and then they're in the membership for a year, so that meant we had a year's worth of transactions that we're sending out every month. And we did that for 3 years, and I was interviewed by Jay Papasan for KW Connect and talking about it. And people, it's a sexy idea.
For sure.
But when you implement it, it's funny to me. There are ideas that are sexy, but then when it's your idea and you have to do it and fund it and
that's the thing is most people
work,
won't do it. Yeah.
It's not sexy at all. In fact, I feel like I feel malnourished, right? Instead of being sexy, I'm like begging for help and make it stop. And so after 3 years, we did pull the plug on it just because it wasn't scalable for what we wanted to do. But teams around the country called us and talked to us about it, and they implemented it. And I'm not saying they won't be successful. They probably will be, right? And that's the thing I always think about is I like being creative. I like trying new things. I also just want to be the one that does it right, so that we get the benefit of it. Yeah. And so I think what you guys are doing is the right thing. And I hope you carry on, and I hope you keep doing it. And I think that at some point you'll figure it out, and it'll come together, and then you'll be the model for people to follow. And if you're not, someone's going to copy you, do what you did, and then just watch them and see what they do.
Right. Well, thanks. Yeah. And I had two thoughts there. One was you're talking about it being a sexy idea with your guys' loyalty program. And I feel like a lot of the time there's a correlation between something that is a sexy idea and seems cool, but maybe not be the best business model or ROI, versus something that seems really boring and dull, but is actually probably pretty great business. And I've actually recently, I moved my real estate license over to a new office, and I'm now specializing in brokering businesses. And so I've been studying a lot of businesses and looking at what types of industries get different multiples. And so just for example, something like a septic pumping company actually trades at a much higher multiple than most businesses would, because it's just kind of this slow, steady thing that is often a much more stable business than something like a restaurant that has massive turnover. The failure rate of restaurants is huge. And so I feel like there's kind of a correlation there with how sexy an idea is. And then, one thing that I do feel good about for Live in Everett, even though we haven't quite perfected our business model, is just speaking of like the cost of these things. I mean, our biggest asset is our audience, and that's not going to go away. Even if we decide that, I don't think this is going to happen, but let's just say we decide that we're not even going to try and make Live in Everett a real company anymore, but we're just going to make it a labor of love and just do it for fun as a hobby, as just some people who love their community. We can totally do that, and it doesn't actually really cost us anything. If we just want to keep our social media channels, where we have thousands of local folks that follow along with what we do, or if we just want to pay, the few $100 a year or whatever our website costs us to keep that going. And so to me, that's a bit of a saving grace about what we're doing. And I think sometimes I have to remind myself of that too, because I have put so much time and effort into it. And sometimes I do stress out a little bit, like, oh, is this going to all be for nothing? But at least I think we'll always hopefully have a little something to show for it and still contribute to our community.
Yeah, I think about that stupid meme. Well, it's a cartoon before memes existed, I guess. You know that guy who's digging a diamond mine, right? And there's he's turning and walking away.
This is when I have to get really good at
and he's 6 inches away from this huge room of diamonds.
Okay.
And he's basically don't give up is the whole point.
Yeah,
he's walking away because he's been digging forever and ever and ever. And then he's right before he hits the payoff, he quits.
He stops.
Right? And I just encourage you not to give up, because I think something one of my coaches said to me that has definitely I've found to be true is that successful people always stop doing what made them successful. Yeah. And I hear that, and the first time I heard it, I was like, that's crazy. No, I won't. I'm not going to do that. And I totally did it at one point. And it's because I think you get burned out and you get fatigued, and then you're like, is it worth it? It's so much work. I don't have the payoff. And I get it, and I understand that. And I'm going to say this to you, and I'm going to say it to people listening, that if you've been doing something and it's paid off in some way, in some regard, just keep doing it and keep on doing it and keep doing it.
Because then you'll eventually go through a cycle where you see those people that you started with. I think this has happened for me. I feel like I've been through just one cycle where you see people that you started around the same time start to drop off because they're stopping and you're not. And I'm beginning to see the fruits of my labor over the last 7 years, not only with Pickett Street, but in the admin world. And so, yeah, I would say the same thing as nobody's going to go through and do all that work that you've done this far to get it this far along. Also, it makes me think, as you were talking, I was thinking a lot about all the influencers on Instagram because I'm a big Instagrammer, and there's such a space there that if they're able to make money with what they're doing, you're essentially like an influencer in Everett. There's just lots of opportunity in ways.
Forget about it. There's this
Yeah.
guy, Seattle Foodie Guy, I think is his handle
oh my God, yeah.
on Instagram.
Yeah.
And this guy makes bank.
Oh, I'm just like,
And literally,
yeah.
he just has to do an
blows my
Instagram
mind.
post.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we have to. Actually, never mind. Quit doing video. That's way too much work.
Yeah,
just go on to Instagram.
yeah, I mean,
That's actually where
that's
part
where I
of
spend a lot of my time.
part of our new membership model. That's one of the things that our the businesses who sign up as members, they get social media posts because social media is powerful. It has such a strong reach for being something that you can create relatively easily.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I met a guy at in Edmonds one day at a food fair last summer who moved to Everett because he saw a post that I did with hashtag the FHA 203K loan because I rehabbed my duplex, and also he mentioned you guys at the same time, and I was like, yeah, people are searching on Instagram for all sorts of things for areas that they're interested in. He specifically moved to Everett rather than Seattle because of seeing our content. It reminded me of that. Yeah, it's super powerful.
I did a FHA 203K loan on my duplex
Shut
as
up.
well.
Oh my
What
God.
are the odds?
Did you own or occupy your duplex?
I did.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We also do a lot of business with Jennifer Beatles, so it was funny that you
Nice.
Yeah,
mentioned
this
that.
is hilarious.
Oh,
Like,
that's
actually.
really?
awesome.
So
Yeah.
we took over Jennifer Beadle's business.
Oh, wow.
So-
Yeah.
So she was out of our office 10 years ago, and then she went to Everett, and she went different places, but eventually she came back here.
Mm-hmm.
And then as she focused more on becoming an investor, real estate investor, and was making enough doing that she didn't have to deal with people, she had us take over her real estate sales business.
Oh, that's
Now
awesome.
she
I
just
had no
travels the
idea.
world and does amazing things.
Yeah, so
Like,
I'm traveling
Yeah.
in April. I'm going to Bali with her.
Nice.
And you may know my fiance then because they were best friends in high school. Jill Gonzalez.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up with Jill as well. That's,
that's
so
too funny.
funny.
So
What a
Jill
small
and I are
world.
engaged and we'll be
Oh,
going with
congrats.
Jennifer to Bali in April.
That's so funny. I'd listened to a couple of your other podcasts and I'd heard you refer to Jill. I never would have imagined that I
Yeah.
knew her. That's awesome.
So random.
Small world.
Well, thank you so much. For everyone listening, just to give you some stats, I looked at your numbers today. You have over 100 patrons on Patreon. You have over 11,000 followers on Facebook, over 5,400 on Instagram, and over 730 subscribers on YouTube. Facebook seems to be the best platform for you. Based on my interaction with your page, I get a lot more information. That's where I see most everything. I do follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, we keep our Instagram a little more loose and fun of a lot of stuff just from our day-to-day, but all of our articles and actual content that we're creating, we publish all of that onto Facebook.
Well, I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think it's such a great way to get involved with the community. I think it's a great way to build a database as well. A former partner of mine, when I bought him out of the business, he was a little bit lost, and he kind of asked me for advice. And he's a great guy, and he loves the outdoors more than anybody. Like if he had his choice, he'd be outside. Period. Like
Yeah.
if it's winter, he wants to be snowboarding. If the other 9 months of the year, he wants to be fly fishing,
Yeah, or sailing.
or sailing, and I'm like, dude, you have to chase your interests. You have to plug into your interests in some way, and make sure that you're building your database naturally that way. And so he started a Facebook group, community page about life in the Northwest, like outdoors, life in the outdoors in the Northwest. And now he has like over 5,000-6,000 followers. And it's a naturally curated experience where people with like minds, like interests, then will rely on him
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to needing their real estate needs, right? Because they'd rather talk to
Absolutely.
someone they
Oh,
can
yeah.
get along with and relate to.
Well, I
than a
always go back
stranger.
to Simon Sinek when he says they all know that we sell real estate. They don't want to work with
Right.
us because of that. They want
And
to know.
I say that too.
they
I
wanna
say
know
all the
us.
time. I worked for I worked for a marketing company before I was in real estate, and I worked. Real estate agents were my clients. And I told them the one thing I learned is people aren't looking for agents, they're looking for a house. So quit putting your face on everything, you know? They're not looking for you. They're looking for a house. So if you have the most homes, you win. You get the most clients.
Yeah.
And we always focused on just crushing. Like, for instance, you won't find advertisements for Jesse or Pickett Street in a grocery store or in a newspaper. Well, we advertise the homes that we list. And when we double down on advertising those, we get more buyers. But it's so funny. It's antithetical to some degree. In real estate, you are selling yourself, but it just doesn't translate well to have like your coiffed headshot from 10 years ago on a bus bench in Everett, Washington. What you guys are doing is a much better idea.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's all about building trust and rapport. I feel like when it comes to sales, you know, it's a real relationship-based business. And so, yeah, like I love what you said your buddy's doing with tapping into his love of nature and the outdoors. And I think, yeah, the more alignment you can be in with who you are and your natural interests, I think the further it's going to help not only take you further, but just be sustainable.
Do you know have you heard of the long tail? Do you know what the long tail is?
Seth Godin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So for our listeners, like, it's crazy to me, the older the internet gets, the longer the tail gets. And I there's this idea that, like, on Amazon, if you saw a bar graph of all the things they sold, that they would sell like 100,000 Kindles, right? And they might sell 2 or 3 gloves for dogs, right? Like, that go on their paws. But there's enough of those they sell, if you add up all the items that only sell like 1 to 5, they far surpass the one item that sells 1 million or whatever the case may be. And so the basis of that is the internet. Its reach forms communities in even the smallest spaces. So no matter what your interest is, you can find a community about that interest. And I just see real estate moving more and more in that direction.
Yeah.
No, it's powerful.
Random. Long tail comment from Jesse.
It's fitting.
But anyway, if you're listening to this and I like the timing of this as well, because it's the end of the year. A lot of people are going to be figuring out their marketing budgets for next year, and they're thinking about what they can do differently. I think you should think very seriously about getting hyperlocal and think about ways you can be a resource to your community. That's what Live in Everett is. It's definitely a resource to its community, so much so that you guys are recognized by politicians and tourism boards and businesses. Tyler Chism, which, by the way, that's a great Western name. Like, he should be a villain in a Louis L'Amour novel.
I knew you were going to say
Tyler
that.
Chism. And then Tyler Chism walked in. He works for the city of Everett now.
He does, yeah. He started there just last month.
And what's his role there?
So he's up in the mayor's office as a part of the communications team, and also kind of a hybrid role, working with the cultural arts department and helping organize some of the city's events. And that's actually something else I didn't even mention, was that we also put on the Everett Food Truck Festival every year. And so he's definitely got a fair amount of event planning experience that he's helping them out with as well.
Yeah, that's a good name. I'm jealous now. Tyler Chism.
Oh, my God.
There were Chisms. I want to say there are Chisms either in Montana
really?
or there literally is a villain in a Louis L'Amour novel named Chism.
God. Well, you could always legally change your name. I'm not against it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, if I do that, it'd be like a one-name thing, like Madonna or Prince, right?
Oh, my gosh.
You don't think so?
I know, I do think so.
I think so.
Actually, I'd love that.
Well, Garret, we appreciate it. We did this on short notice, and we
Yes, we
appreciate
did.
it. And
thanks
it's
for having
been
me.
fun talking to you, so
Likewise.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's an honor to be here.
Till next time, everyone.